I'm just going to adjust my picture. There we go.
You art directing the scene.
Yeah, I had to get my plant in there. There we go.
If you guys have YouTube on, just make sure you put the sound off on the YouTube.
Yep.
So we are stream less than a minute ago. So we are live now.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Cool.
Hey guys, it's great to see you, Thiago. I haven't seen you. I think last time I saw you, you were crashing through a window and covered in blood.
Yeah, it was was a good end of night, I would say.
When was that? Was that off festival or something?
Was off. Someone we've been drink the whole night in the same bar. So the door of the bar was open the whole night, and someone suddenly closed. And I was talking to someone walking, and I walked straight to the door, and the door smashed. I cut my ears.
It was like out of a movie. It just fucking exploded.
Yeah, exploded. I had a lot of cuts in the body.
Was this the time when you got arrested as well and had to sleep on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
No, that was in New York. That was in F5.
Reputation precedes.
I've got a good reputation in shows.
All right, shall we start the show with what are you guys drinking?
Yeah. So what do you drink, Ori?
I brought a beer.
Oh.
It's a Meltdown. It's called a Meltdown 6 points, the local beer. It's a double IPA. So.
Oh, nice.
What do you drink, James?
Well, I went local. It's called Solitaire Blonde. It's a blonde ale made in Shipley, which is just down the road from us. That's what I'm going with. How about you, Thiago?
I just have a glass of white wine this time. The Bloody Mary wasn't enough alcohol last time. So before we started, just want to.
Oh, wait there! I just want to say I stepped the game up and I got some pub snacks. I got some pork scratchings. That's right.
Wow,
that's good.
Because we got the NHS, so it's all right if I have a heart attack.
So before we start talking a little bit, I just want to thank Orion to just for you accept the invitation and join us to this crazy moment we're living now and our new format of Sino Evil with this live stream. So we're getting better each time, so this one should be a lot of fun, but thank you very much just to be part of this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Like you said when you reached out, I think we've been talking about this for 10 years for me to come and do Evil. So silver lining. It's great that I'm able to join you guys. I'm really excited.
Yeah. It's
10 years in the making.
Yeah, that was one of the first things with me and James discuss. This is the opportunity to bring people to the show. We never managed to bring.
Never. That's always difficult with Sino Evil is like when people are in town, does it coincide with a date or having to pay for transport and what have you when it's a free show.
Right.
Yeah, as always. But at least now we made that happen. So just to start, let's play the show reel. We're gonna play Buck's show reel, and then we can start talking a little bit and have a quick chat. Let me just share my screen with you guys. Give me a moment. So yeah, it's all good. So let's do it. Nice. I must say the the glove one with the puppet is still one of my favorites.
Mine
One
too.
of my
That's one of my all-time
favorites.
favorites.
Yeah, I love that glove so much.
We actually, that was part of our, we haven't done a show reel in, I don't know, years and years. But that was something we made for our website launch. We launched a few months ago. And it kind of coincided with us moving into a new office space. And one of the things with the office space was we really wanted more conference rooms to kind of gather in groups. And then you got to name the conference rooms. And so we ended up naming the conference rooms all after our puppets, which is pretty funny. So we didn't do a glove one, but we named them after a lot of the other characters and puppets we've made over the years. And then in each of the conference rooms, they kind of display one of the puppets, which is cool.
Yeah, that project is good. Cool. So should we start talking a little bit, just a few questions about the situation, the coronavirus situation?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear how like each studio deals with the current situation. Because obviously it affects everybody. Like now with everybody working off site, do you feel like you're kind of, I guess your workflow is going to have to change because, you know, after this, I think the world will be a slightly different place, but as to how different, I don't know. How has it affected Buck as a workflow, especially when you've got your studios in LA and Sydney as well?
How many people you guys are now?
We're about 250 all in with across the 3 studios. And then of course we're bunch of freelancers on top of that. So yeah, I would say kind of, overnight we went from 3 offices to 300 or something. So it's definitely it's definitely had its challenges, but I think also because we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years and over the last year especially to organize and work more globally across offices. I think we already had a lot of tools in place. And I think you guys, as you guys know too, I think in production and animation, it's like we're all pretty adaptable, right? We're all pretty,
that's true.
Every project's new, everything's different. Like production people are really good at figuring shit out. So I would say, it's been challenging and we're learning every day. And it's definitely like, there are some pain points, but I think we're weathering it pretty well. I'm really, really impressed with the team. Like it's been really cool to see not just how efficient everyone is, I guess, or like how much work everyone's getting done. I mean, we just counted up the projects. I think we're doing something like 60 active projects right now across all 3 offices. We're probably busier than we've ever been. But even more than that, I think what's cool to see is how everyone's learning to kind of connect, stay connected socially, right? Because like what we do is very much a team sport. It's not like, our teams can be anywhere from 3 people to 100 people, and so it's been really cool to see how all these teams are connecting with each other socially and staying really involved, which is really.
Do you think it will make a company like leaner and more efficient in a way, like with this new kind of setup?
I think that probably remains to be seen. Like I think we're in a good, speaking for what I've been seeing, I think I read this interesting article. I think it was from those guys at Automatic, is that what they're called? The ones who do WordPress. They're kind of, they've sort of always been like a distributed team model from the very beginning. And so they've been kind of like thought leaders in this time. And they were talking about like the various stages of work from home, and I think like a lot of teams that have never worked in a distributed way, like the first thing you do is you just recreate the way that you were working in the office. You're kind of like, you're just recreating meetings or having, you used to like have a meeting in a conference room, and so now you all get on a Zoom and you have a meeting in a Zoom.
True.
And I think that what ends up happening to a lot of, and we've experienced some of this, is you just end up having like fatigue, Zoom fatigue. And so I think especially there's a lot of leadership right now that is just working their asses off. Like a lot of project leads and stuff are, you know, waking up in the morning and starting their day at 9 and not finishing until 9, 10 at night, just because of the amount of like meetings they have to have and the amount of feedback. And I think we're getting progressively better at that, at sort of asking ourselves, does this need to be a meeting or can it just be an email? Can we work asynchronously more often?
I guess that's quite difficult when you're in multiple time zones as well. Obviously, everyone's slightly different, and I guess there's also a degree of self-discipline. Like, you know, I do think it's generally good to finish at, like, say 6 p.m. and have that time separate from, you know, whatever you're working at. But if it's different time zones, it just becomes trickier to do that.
And I think the other thing as well, I don't know how you're feeling, but as you said, you know, like having all the meetings to deal, you know, before is, at least for me, it's so easy to have everyone in the studio when you give feedback straight away, you know, you can sit and see things. And now everything is like, oh, let me send a message. Let me jump in, in a Zoom call, you know, just takes a lot longer. And I feel like we end up working long hours just to try and fit the same amount of work we used to do before. And that situation, you already home. So you don't really leave home, you don't come back. So it just feels like, oh, I'm already home. So you carry on working, you know? So I think it's adapting that is quite the challenge at the moment.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like I said, we're like, speaking for myself, I think I'm getting better at it. I think I've always, I've learned already to sort of separate my work and home life a little bit better, because I do end up working from home quite a bit. Like you might relate as a studio owner, right? It's like, it's your baby, so you're kind of always working. And so I found over the years that I need to find a way to kind of put it away when I'm at home and really like be present and focus on my family. And so I think I sort of already have that maybe consciousness in my mind when this all happened. And you know, I'm also really grateful that like I'm able to have a separate room that I can go and just be like, I'm at work now. And then, you know, just the activity of walking into that room and sitting down, I'm at work. I get up and I just have a really short commute to lunch, which is awesome. You know, it's just across the living room. So I think like setting up those mental barriers as well as physical barriers, even if it's like, even if you're living in a one-room apartment with a roommate or with a significant other and a kid, like you still can, set up your little workspace that's like, this is just for work. And when I sit down, I'm at work. And when I get up, I'm not at work. I think like all of those little things we're all learning, you know, we're all learning like the best ways to like keep ourselves sane.
Yeah, it's quite, I think that aspect's very tricky just to, I don't know, I think there's another aspect of when you're working from home, sometimes it's quite easy to distract yourself with other things. But then at the same time, you kind of make up for it by being more efficient when you are focused as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny too, right? Because everyone works differently. I think that's,
it's sometimes
there was a lot of feedback.
It's kind of nice to kind of pick your own hours a little bit, because some people are more efficient in the mornings, some people are more efficient in the afternoons. And I guess having that flexibility is pretty good.
Yeah, and I think especially for what we do, right? It's like we're very much, you know, talent-driven companies, and I think for us, like, you know, some people are going to be more efficient in the morning. Some people might work in like better, you know, a little quick 1 hour spurt with little breaks in between. And it's like, I think in a perfect world, if we can figure out how to make this work, like getting back to your point, I think we might maybe not be more efficient, but like be more adaptable and accommodating of everyone's individual way of working that's going to get the most output from them, right? Or the most like, not necessarily even efficiencies, but just kind of like the best work from everyone, you know?
Kind of on a similar point, I was thinking the other day, like if the future does hold, if everybody is kind of more, you know, working from home or what have you, whatever the future may entail, I wonder if location becomes less important as a studio. Because, you know, previously, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, if you've got an address in New York, London, LA, it kind of has a more solidarity, you know, something about it, something tangible. But whereas if everyone's working from home, does a location matter as much anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all stuff that we're figuring out or thinking about quite a bit, you know, and I think that like, I miss, speaking for myself, and I think for a lot of the folks I'm talking to, like we really miss being together. We really like each other. You know,
Yeah.
I think like one of the things that makes us as, you know, good as we are at what we do, like when Buck is really good and making really good work, it looks really similar, I've noticed. And what it looks like is it's a bunch of people just trying shit together and like making mistakes because they all trust each other. And
that's the best way to learn, though, I think.
Push on boundaries. Yeah, and it's like, you know, a lot of folks I think are at Buck because they're sitting next to someone who's really talented, who's also really giving, and you're learning a lot just from like osmosis or walking by someone's screen or like a little serendipitous conversation because you saw something cool or you were talking about something around the coffee machine or whatever, right? And so I think like that's what's missing right now are all of those like little interactions like that.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a lot to be said for the way we communicate in person, especially when we're solving like really complex problems. And I think like the design problems that we tackle these days are like bigger and more complicated than they've ever been. And so I think that we're getting better at working in a distributed way, but I also think like nothing can really replace being together. My suspicion is that it'll be after this, it'll be some mix of both, you know. In a perfect world, we would be able to kind of accommodate everyone. And to your point, I think it might give us greater ability to work with like the most talented people no matter where they are, you know. But I think we'll still have hubs. I just think it might mean that we've also gotten better at working with you know, a variation of like what a team shape looks like, you know.
Yeah, that human interaction is key. I mean, like the best companies or the most fun companies I've worked with is always been like you get the work done, but it's kind of like hanging out with friends, and that's how you make. You know, I think that comes across in the product that you ultimately give to the client as well. Maybe we could do like pressure sensitive gloves so you can still fist bump virtually.
I think this is a similar problem in like when we talk about online courses nowadays. Everyone trying to create this kind of environment with online courses, but online course is quite hard for you have the interactive between humans. You know, it's pretty much what you're saying. You know, sharing the information. You know, for me is one thing I discuss a lot with students nowadays. People has the mentality, they think they want to leave university and they want to be freelance, but they never work for someone, you know, they never understand the process, be together with someone, sharing the information. It's so hard for you to learn, you know, not being on the, you know, if you leave university with no experience, it's so hard for you learn from how people work, you know, just like people doing tutorials online or anything. I think the interactive with human, the sharing the knowledge is really what makes people strong, you know. So it's quite hard, you know, if everyone is in one place and you have a problem, you need to ask someone, it's quite hard to share the information, especially when it comes to creative, you know, that sharing, even if it's mistake, you know, one mistake sometimes can trigger something nice, you know, to on the creative path.
Also having somebody on that point, having somebody tell you that sometimes you make a mistake, but that mistake can look nice. Having the confidence when someone walks past your screen and go, oh, actually, that's pretty good. It's like, oh yeah, I meant to do that. You know, you can't really get that if you're working remotely in some ways. Maybe the solution.
I mean, I think there are ways. I think we're figuring it out, right? I think one of the interesting things I've been noticing with the teams is that like they're spending more and more time working, like actually working on projects in a more distributed way, meaning through emails, through spreadsheets, through Slack, through all the tools that we use, right? Like to work in a more distributed, like asynchronous way. But they're coming together just to socialize, which is kind of super interesting. Like all the Zoom meetings now, most of them are like board games, like online board games, or like, you know, we'll have like department-wide meetings where people will do like show and tells or stuff like that. It's really all like community building, which is super interesting to see. So it's like less and less of those kinds of meetings and more like just ways to like connect, like emotionally with the people that you're working with, which is kind of interesting.
I like the board game aspect. I think that could be quite fun.
Yeah.
There's some cool services out there that actually like facilitate it. And like I think a few folks have been doing Dungeons and Dragons online, which is
I've never played that. But I really want to get into that in a way. I'm quite nerdy.
I used to
part
play
of our
when
industry,
I was
isn't
young.
it?
Yeah, I've got one question coming back when you talk about you being as busy, like at the moment you guys being really busy with a lot of projects, around 60 projects, that coming back to the coronavirus mentality, did you guys feel you got affected to that? Or because talking to a lot of studios, a lot of people, getting that situation when they're receiving a lot of requests to see, for quoting and things, but it's not a lot of client to, putting the hammer down and say, let's do the project and spending the money. But as you said, you guys being really busy now, can you tell us a little bit how you're feeling? Did you felt like the situation with coronavirus is really affecting you guys, or, you didn't see any much change for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, there's definitely been a ton of interest in animation right now, obviously during this time with live action being next to impossible, although some people are figuring it out. And for a while there, I would say for the first couple of weeks, we were seeing a ton of incoming, meaning like a lot of calls, a lot of opportunities, kind of like you described, but at the same time, nothing really materializing yet. And compounding that just with a ton of volatility, like a lot of projects that would come in, they seemed like they were getting ready to book and then they would just disappear, or they would be partway through and they'd be like, you know what, we're going to hold back because of the Olympics or whatever. So there were a lot of projects that were coming in, but a lot that were going in away at the same time. And so I would say that like as a company, we kind of decided let's look at everything, like we want to be really helpful to our clients right now. That's one thing. We have a lot of like really long-term client relationships and we want to be able to be helping them through this time. But then at the same time, also knowing that like, we don't know what this is going to do to the economy moving forward. So we just took the position of like, let's look at everything, let's entertain everything. And I think in doing that, we got pretty busy. And then we started to see a lot of those opportunities really come to fruition. And so I think that's been good, and then also created some challenges for us because I think we're looking at a large volume of work right now at a time when we're also learning how to work from home. So I definitely feel like the situation has affected some of that, but I think also our strategy has affected some of that as well.
Yeah, the economic situation in going into the future is going to be really interesting. So I kind of feel like a large number of companies are probably spending their budget right now, kind of thing. And then, next year, I think they'll probably like pare back on their budget and just reuse previous assets. Because obviously you'll say, I know the whole situation with shot footage, so a lot of people are going to animation instead. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what happens in, like, say, 6 months' time. Because I kind of feel like a lot of companies will just pare back on their budgets and just reuse or rejig previous animations. That's my hunch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's sort of, it's
survival
one of the challenges. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the challenges of our industry, right? It's like we're project to project for the most part. I mean, we have a lot of like long-term client relationships that, do exist on sort of a retainer model, but for the most part, we work like most production companies where we can see out, sometimes the furthest out you can see is like a quarter, maybe four weeks or something.
Yeah.
And so for us, I think like the next quarter, we're cautiously optimistic, but like who the hell knows what's happening, like how long this is going to last and how what effects this is going to have. Like marketing budgets do tend to be some of the first to be slashed. So.
Yeah, it's such an unprecedented situation right now. Like there's just when you think back to when Lehman Brothers and the previous crash and what have you, it was a vastly different beast to what's happening now. Now it's like completely global. Normally with an economy, as one goes down, another bumps up somewhere else. So you have some kind of equilibrium, but this is just everywhere.
Just going everywhere.
Well, it's also, it's like subject very much right now, especially to something that, for the most part is out of our control, right? So
yeah, totally out of control. Out of our control.
Yes, I mean, I think like I'm like, for me personally, I tend to be like the eternal optimist. So I just try to live my life like through my hopes rather than my fears. And I think that's kind of all any of us can do right now, right? And I think like, do our best to make sure that we come out of this with a better leadership and a better administration, and that we like, become motivated to make some change around this time.
We did make some make animation great again hats.
Nice.
I wanted to wear it, but I didn't want to. It might seem too political because the resolution is not too great.
Exactly. It seems like it's the wrong idea.
Yeah. That's
okay.
cool.
Maybe all right. Let's move on from the
let's move from this coronavirus. Let's be more positive and give people hope. I've got a question just for people to understand a little bit more, because a lot of people, when we talk about like creative directors, executive creative directors, do you mind tell us what is your normal day at work? What you do since you get in the studio, how is your day work? So people understand a little bit more what you do, what is a creative director is doing, what is your main key function.
How would you explain it to your parents? I think is the key.
Yeah. How to explain to your parents? That's the best way.
Well, I guess my Slack description says that I'm a hoverer and a pointer, so that's probably true. I tend to, when I first get in, I'll probably like kind of just walk around and make rounds like in a normal office environment, and then in kind of a distributed office environment, I do like the virtual version of that. So I check in with like my team that I'm directly responsible for, which is like the creative leadership. So for me, my official title actually is Chief Creative Officer. So I'm a co-Chief Creative Officer with Ryan Honey, who's one of my partners. And he's LA based and I'm New York based. And we're sort of responsible for the creative health and culture of and the creative business, I guess, of the office. And so our role is really to kind of provide like vision and a roadmap for what we're doing and where we're heading creatively. So, I kind of described that as like turning on the high beams. I've heard, I think it was someone at the design director of Twitter was talking about that as his role is sort of like, our job, like I think as designers is being comfortable with what's uncomfortable. Like we don't really know where a project is going to lead us or where the next job is going to lead us. So our job is just to kind of like turn the high beams on and sort of point us in the direction. And then our team might take us in a totally different direction. And so I think that's kind of my role is really just like a guide, essentially like a creative guide and a soundpost. And a lot of that for me is giving away ownership to people. And so I've especially spent the last year, we've gone through a ton of growth and I've been spending a lot of time organizing the office. So that's still an ongoing project for me. So I would say first thing is I come in, I check in with my team, and then I have sort of a few ongoing projects and I actually try to block those out on my calendar and spend a little bit of time with each project each day. And so, we've been working on like mission statement and values and company purpose and things like that. And I spend a chunk of time doing that every day. And then another big initiative right now is pushing more into self-initiated projects. So like we're doing a lot of work in like the IP space. So we're developing a couple of video games right now. We've got a lot of like animated content that's in development. And so I spend a bit of my day doing that as well. It's just checking in on where those things are going and checking with my partners. And, we do daily check-ins or twice weekly check-ins with my partners as well.
So you set the
I would
company
say
up
like
with,
a lot of meetings. It's mostly
Yeah.
meetings, mostly talking. And then I try to protect a little bit of brain space each day, like for long-term stuff.
So I've got kind of two questions really. Like, when you set the company up with Ryan, do you guys ever? I guess you guys have got a very similar creative vision, or do you ever have kind of like disagreements, like where the company direction or that kind of side of things?
I would say Ryan is like very much he's my office wife, or one of my office wives. Like we over the last 15 years, I would say like on average we talk, 4 times a week. Like often it's every day. And then lately, as we take on bigger projects, sometimes that'll diminish, but I think as a result, that does keep us really aligned. And I think we've always had a very similar vision. I think maybe we have different ways of going about it sometimes, but ways that have always like complemented each other. Like he's very much he's very action oriented. Like he hates having like something unresolved, like if there's some unresolved issue, he just wants to get it done and attack it. And I think that's also true for like creative opportunities and like risk. Like he has probably a higher risk tolerance than I do, and I tend to be a little bit more like thoughtful, or it takes me more time to work through things. And so I think we're like a good sounding board for each other, but we always very much end up on the same page, which is awesome.
It's good that balance as well.
Yeah, complementary.
Yeah.
And then we have a third partner. We have a third partner, Jeff, who's our CEO, and he's he's kind of the third in the tripod. Like I think we create a lot of stability for each other because like we're very much a creatively run company, and Jeff is also a very creative person, but he's more in charge of operations and the financial health of the company. And so I think that's a really great balance. Like we have two creative leaders, and then we have like a more sort of
a realist
leader.
The
realist.
realistic
So it's like he can always keep us in check and make our lives miserable, but we can always outvote him. So there's like we'll always take creative risks, and he's learned to become over time, I think, more comfortable with those creative risks because he sees the value that they brought us. Like you mentioned that F5 project. There's been a number of them, like the Good Books thing we did over the years, the David Blaine one, like Slapstick, the app we're developing, and now some of these new video games. And I think like we've all seen how that's really propelled us over the years to like do things that, you're not going to see their dividends on a balance sheet, right? There's not going to be a direct connection of like always of like, oh, we get this job because of that.
It's not something numbers can tell you.
But you can really see over time how it like galvanized our teams and inspired, us in the industry. And so I think he's become more comfortable with some of those creative risks over the years, and we've become much more cautious of like, putting ourselves too far into an uncomfortable place. So it's a really good balance.
So how do you balance between like commercial projects and kind of like studio projects and all that kind of side of things?
I mean, I think that one of the things that Jeff kind of advocates for, which I've really come to believe in, is like you definitely don't want to risk like the core, and like the core of what we do is creative services, and so we're always trying to protect that. And I think even if you drill even deeper to that, I think it's really the people. Like we've always been a very like people focused group, and like recognized that that's all we are. Like we've owned some computers and like some printers and like a 3D printer, but like it's really, it's our people, our everything. And so I think that like protecting that and protecting, our jobs, and like, we didn't lay anyone off in the last recession. We haven't laid anyone off during this one, including like our cleaning staff and everyone. And I think that's something that we're really proud of.
That's nice.
And that we really, we like, we invest a lot into our people because that's our brain trust, you know. And we've always carried a lot more staff, I think, than a lot of studios for that reason, you know.
You guys seem to have, from an outsider point of view, you guys seem to have quite a good staff retention compared to a lot of creative companies, and even people who have gone freelance or do their own thing still come back and work with you guys. You know, like Stephen Kelleher, and you know, I'm sure Brian Gossett drops in every now and then, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, like, as a younger, you know, as a younger creative director, studio owner, I think it was hard. Like when your like best folks or like your good friends leave, you're like, fuck, you know, like it can hurt a little
it's
bit.
Like family, really, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, and they are like family. They really are. It really is like a family. And I think, though, you know, like family, I think you have to, not to sound too corny, but you know, you have to let them spread their wings sometimes. And, you know, loving them means letting them go. So I think like you sort of learn that, you know, you'll learn that the whole, you know, the harder you hold on to something, the more it's going to slip through your fingers, right? So I think like we've always sort of talked of ourselves as like an organization of attraction, and I think that's part of it. It's like, you're here, we're gonna do the best we can to make this the place that you feel creatively fulfilled. But if you don't, then leave. And then if you want to come back and work with us, absolutely come back and work with us. Like, we're not, you know, I think that's been cool to see it, you know, after 15 years, to sort of have these relationships like with Steven and others that have just been working with us for years and have come and gone on staff. Fede Reano is another one, if you know him at all. You know,
who's that?
amazingly talented. Fede Reano. He's like, if you don't know him, look him up. His Instagram, bonkers. But he's also someone who's come and gone over the years. And, you know, I love that guy to death. And, you know, he's off doing his own thing right now, but we still get to work with him, and he still graces us with his.
I think that's kind of part and parcel of being an artist as well. And sometimes you just have, you know, you just feel the urge to do your own thing.
Totally, yeah.
I think Thiago is more of the creepy uncle of the family.
Chad definitely represents, like, I wouldn't put it that way. He's definitely, like, you know, he's sort of one of the many folks, well, along with like Iker Moreno, who are sort of like the heart and the soul, especially of the New York office, you know.
What other questions do we have? All right.
Yeah, I think it's nice. Also, you know, we got quite a few people watching as well, and a lot of people see back as, you know, you guys be inspiration for other studios or the freelance artists out there. You know, what would be a message, you know, for someone that really looking to maybe starting or maybe has the dream to work with Buck? You know, what are you looking when people applying for a job at Buck, when people want to work with you guys? What normally you looking for, you know, on showreel, on people, on relationship with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not one easy answer to that. We're so multifaceted at this point, and are working across all sorts of different disciplines. So it's like hard to give a concrete example, but I would say in general, we favor generalists. Like we like people who are curious, creatively curious in lots of things. And I think the people that are the most successful at Buck are folks that want to get their hands in lots of things. And we've had some incredibly talented folks come through the office in the past that were kind of just wanted to do their thing. And that doesn't always work out. Like, they're amazing talents, but, you know, they might want to, I think sometimes as people are trying to figure out their path, they sort of recognize, oh, maybe I am more of like an illustrator who just wants to do this one type of thing, or I want to be more of like a director that's just got this vision. And I think at Buck, it's like we have lots of fingerprints on everything, and you have to like that. So I think those are the things we tend to, the more abstract qualities, I guess, is we're looking for folks that are really curious, but also really collaborative. So we try to kind of suss that out during the interview process. It's just, you know, it might not be, but then I think like I would also temper that by saying like we've hired people just because they had one awesome thing on their reel, like that I've never seen before. That's like really unique. You know what I mean? Like there was this one artist, Kyle Mowat, who's not at Buck anymore, but an incredible animator, and he did this piece that I think was his student piece that was called Ball Pit. If you want to look him up, Kyle Mowat, Ball Pit. It was just this crazy hand-drawn like marble maze. It was this weird marble maze. If you guys have seen our David Blaine piece, he was very much responsible for like the eyeball sphincter anus scene. That came out.
That's what I look for in a show reel. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that came out of
3 tick boxes right there.
Brand. Yeah. So I think sometimes we're just looking for that like weirdo vibe, you know. And I think it's really tempting right now. Getting back to kind of your comment about like online classes, I think it can be really tempting to just kind of get the skills, like to say, I love, you know, Buck or Cookie or whatever studio you're looking at, and say, I want to do stuff just like them, and so I'm going to learn to do it just like them. And it's really tempting when you're hiring and you look at someone, you're like, holy shit, that looks just every bit as good as the stuff we produce. I want to hire this person. And then I think we've learned that sometimes they get in an environment and you're trying to solve a new challenge, and those types of folks that haven't learned to sort of push into new areas, but have just learned to be really skill oriented, have a hard time kind of being self-directed or self-motivated. And that's what our studio thrives on, is people's point of view and being self-motivated. And if you're just kind of like, tell me what to do, you know, we have a place for some people like that, but long-term, that's not how you're going to be successful.
Yeah. I think that's a bit of the issue with all these online courses and what have you. I think they're great, but I think some people just follow the tutorial rather than learn from it and then learn how to apply it creatively. Like, you have to take these things and use your own ideas, and that, you know, I imagine that's how you strive, isn't it? Rather than just say, oh, I can do this one thing, but I don't know how it really works.
Yeah, it's the same we discussed on the other live stream with Inge as well, you know. And I think everyone always has that, you know, people is always want to know what software you're using, you know. It's more, they think, you know, if they can learn the same software you do, they can do the same work, you know, and they forget about what really matters, you know, the creative solution you bring to the project, how to solve that in a design way, you know, and people forget about that. Doesn't matter how you're gonna do. So
yeah,
it's quite
and
tricky.
I think like I think about that as we start to like have more relationships with schools and stuff, right? And I think we have quite a few staff members who are professors and teachers at some of these schools, right? And I think it's like interesting to think about curriculum that way, because when I was coming up, you couldn't go to like a motion graphics department or curriculum. There was no curriculum. We were sort of, I think we were figuring it out as we went along, and it was really like our work 15 years ago was terrible. If you go back and look at it, it's pretty humbling, right? And it's like,
but everybody else's was even worse. That's okay.
Right. But the quality of work that you're seeing coming out of students right now is insane, right? It's like the quality is so top. But I think like you do need that balance. You need like a balance of like a real fundamental education where you sort of understand like why you're doing it, not just how to do it, right? You understand like what the reason, what the purpose is behind that, which is really ultimately to like connect emotionally with another human being, you know? And so it's like, if you can understand that, then there's lots of different ways to do that. There isn't just one way to do it or one software to do it with, you know?
It's interesting that I guess one of the shifts as well from, let's say, 15 or so years ago is also the software and availability. Like, actually, I was thinking earlier, like if coronavirus has hit 15 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do half the stuff we do from home. Whereas nowadays, you basically just need, you know, like you can do a lot of stuff on a laptop and a relatively slow connection as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, no, I mean, that's so true. That whole democratization of media, like we've built our whole company on that, right? Like when we were, you know, I think one of the reasons that we've been successful is just timing and luck. It's like we came along at a time when, you know, there were a lot of the established like VFX studios who had these $1 million flame suites and had their whole business models built around billing against that, you know? And we were like the young scrappy ones, right? We were like, no, we can do that same thing like in After Effects. I don't need a flame, you know, like I can do it here on my laptop. And so I think like that mentality, and it's weird, I still think of Buck that way. It's weird. I still think of us as like the scrappy underdogs. And
that's a part of agility as well. Agility as a company, like just to take
exactly,
a laptop.
Yeah. And I think that's what we talk about that a lot, is like that we have this ability to kind of like draw a really small circle around a project or a really big circle. Like we can make this cool little thing with like 1-2 cinema artists that can make this beautiful 30-second spot, or we can like draw a big circle around 100 people that make something like Apple Share Your Gifts. Whereas I think like a lot of more like traditional VFX shops have like pipeline, and there's just like that way of doing it. It has to go through the pipeline, and that pipeline has a ton of people, and it gets really expensive, and then you have to bill against that. And so I think
feel like oil tankers,
kind of do both. Yeah, we
feel like an oil tanker. It takes so long to kind of steer it in one direction, kind of stuck in one way, and you can't really change it as quick. I think someone was asking a question that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. One, Daniel Zuko asked. He asked, what are your personal ambitions for the company? What do you want Buck to be in 5 years' time? More like gaming, long format content.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. I mean, I think, like me personally or Buck as a company, I think, you know, those sometimes are the same. We're also very much like a big egalitarian organization. I would say, like, for me personally, where I've always found like inspiration and purpose is more in like creating an environment for all of our artists to be fulfilled and for it to be like a sustainable career for everyone. And I think I'm also trying to push us into a place where we're using our powers for good, you know, like that. I think that the future, especially coming out of this, I think it's no longer enough to just say, you're going to get really creative work or you're going to be really well paid. I think it's also becoming more and more important that your work has personal purpose and meaning for you. So I think we are trying to push into more purpose-driven work, but also like doing that in an ecosystem that like allows all of us to, you know, feed our children and have careers and buy homes and stuff like that. So like that's the one like business side of it. And then I think from the creative side, it's related to that. I'm really interested in us having like a blended model where we're both a services industry and we're also like a creative hub that's pushing out and creating our own self-initiated and self-motivated creative output. And so like, I don't see us pivoting and becoming like a game company or like a movie studio, but being like an interesting blended model that can kind of be an ecosystem that feeds a lot of different parts. And so I think we've been seeing that happen for years. I think you see that in a lot of like entertainment companies and entertainment, you know, actors even, right? Where it used to be like you were a sellout if you did a commercial. And now that's just like, hey, that's what it takes to be an actor, right? You're going to do lots of different things to have a you know, sort of rewarding, sustainable career as an artist. So I see Buck as a home for that. And that's what I would like to see, a place where we're able to kind of create this ecosystem where we do services work and client work that's really rewarding and really creative, but also can do kind of our own IP and our own entertainment that's creatively rewarding for other reasons.
There's I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, so I apologize up front. A person called Antonio Icona asks, do you find it quite challenging to present your work to clients? I was kind of thinking, based on that question, what's the most like interesting or strange pitch you've been in? Because obviously, you know, you're very creative led, so there must be some quite out there ideas that you must have thought, oh shit, I sold that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I think like I'm very much like more of on this, I guess, the spectrum of personality types. I'm like more on the introverted side of things, which doesn't mean that I don't enjoy interactions and don't enjoy being on stage. It's just like it takes more preparation and it can be more draining for me. So I think I do find it challenging sometimes to like do public speaking engagements. And in terms of like client calls and client presentations.
Is this why we never got you down to see No Evil?
I mean, you know, I do like I do enjoy it. So, yeah, exactly. But you know, so I would say that like I do find it rewarding, and I think that the thing for both public speaking and like client presentations is if I'm passionate about the thing that I'm talking about, those nerves just go away. You know, it's like I might be nervous beforehand, but as soon as I start getting into like talking about this thing that I'm super passionate about, that I put all my thought and heart and soul into creating and getting excited about, like, and I think that's true for most creative people. It's like if you're excited about the project and the idea, like you're going to express it, you know, and that passion is going to come through. So it's almost like, don't worry about that. Like just focus on being passionate about the idea, and your passion will shine through when you talk authentically about it. And I think that's what clients buy ultimately. That's what sells.
Especially when you get that feedback. Like I think like if you're talking about public speaking as well as pitching, like when you get that feedback either from a client or the audience, and you go, oh, okay, they get this, you know, kind of spurs you on even more so, and you kind of get more into it and self-perpetuates.
Yeah, and I think whether we want to admit it or not, that's what a lot of us, I think, are motivated by in this industry. It's like, we're not just, yes, we might just be doing it, especially now, like alone in our room, but what I think it's getting it out into the world, right? It's like, that's why it's so challenging when we have these projects that are under strict NDA that you can't share with the world, because that's what motivates a lot of us, right? It's like, we want to, you know, I think it's not just about like kudos or reputation. It's about like actually inspiring people, right? It's like I've had experiences, like I remember there was this Sherwin-Williams campaign, which is like the longest thing I've ever worked on. I think we've done like 17 commercials for Sherwin-Williams, and it's these commercials where the whole world is made out of like these paint chips, right? These paper colored paint chips. And so you know, over the years, we've created so many of these, but they were always really interesting because they're always really beautiful. They're really like artistically driven. And when you see that cut through in a commercial space, it feels very different, right? And like, it's often set to like a very soothing, nice piece of music. And I remember like the client, who's like a paint manufacturer, like loves this campaign. They've been doing it for 17 years or whatever. And they just send us like fan videos of people that have authentically responded to how much they love their commercials. And there was the first one I got, I remember, was from like a person like in Ohio, and it was like their kid, their little like baby, dancing in front of like this paint commercial, like to this nice music. And they're like, every time this commercial's on, because it was playing like on repeat on like Home Shopping Network or something, like this kid gets up and dances in front of it and loves it. And it was like, I remember just being like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like, it made me feel so good, right? I think a similar thing like happened with the Apple film we did for the holidays last year for the share your gifts. It's like, we got so many people coming in that, messages saying how much it inspired them, and the message inspired them for a commercial. And I think ultimately, whether we admit it or not, that's why a lot of us do what we do. So
I think so.
I think that is important that you kind of get that out there,
It's interesting that there's such a feedback from a commercial as well, in some ways.
Yeah, I think like that's sort of I think that's the dark truth of like commercials, is it's hard to find purpose in it, because sometimes you do feel like it's not valued. Like you're putting so much, like, do you ever ask yourself, like, why do I care so much about?
I know. Well, it's kind of a vehicle.
It's not like you care about, like, yeah, it's a vehicle. You don't care about necessarily selling that lawnmower or whatever. It's about all the artistry that you pour into it that's going to inspire someone on the other side.
It's a vehicle for getting whatever you want to do out there in some way, shape, or form. It might be slightly compromised because you're, at the end of the day, you're selling a product, but that's better than nothing in a lot of ways. And you're still thinking about things creatively, and it means you can, later on you can put that other ideas into like a short film. So I think it's all good, really. I've got no problems.
Yeah, and I think you're putting something beautiful. It's like you're putting something beautiful that's well crafted and thoughtful out into the world. Right?
It's still making the world a better place. It's better than some whatever crappy commercial. This has got like heart and soul poured into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
again, I think that's always been our ethos. We sort of talk about that like like if we're going to sort of make the best tampon commercial we can make.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like there is no bad brief. It's way harder to make a shitty tampon commercial than a really good tampon.
I think the only project I ever had an issue with, I was drafted in on a project out of nowhere, and it's just I think it was basically selling like cigarettes to underage kids in Russia. And I worked in it for like a day, and I was like, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, of course. And everyone has their line in the sand. That's what's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's quite important to, especially keeping the creative side, keep your soul there, exactly. where you want to go, what you accept to do as well, Cool. I think we're getting close to 1 hour chat, so I think we should do the last question and
there was a good one. Where was it? From Jake Roberts saying, with Buck being held up as one of the big daddies in the industry, is there a lot of pressure to keep growing and push boundaries and know that there are a lot of eyes on you?
No, not until now. I hadn't actually thought about that.
So I guess it kind of links into we've got like a list of questions we kind of dip into, but it kind of links into how do you stay on top of your game and keep everything looking like fresh? So it kind of links into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think it kind of goes back to culture, I guess, for the most part, right? It's like we're sort of the most inspired by each other, I would say, in a lot of ways. Like, of course, we look at the industry, but I think we have I still love coming to work every day because I'm surrounded by all these really talented people who are also incredibly humble, incredibly giving. And so I think we're always pushing each other. And, the most fun I ever have on a project is that quality that I was talking about earlier of like building on each other's ideas, right? And we've all been in that experience where, like my personal process, like I can work in a solitary way and I enjoy it sometimes, but the best ideas come from building off of each other's ideas. And, when you're in an environment where everyone is super ego-free and really giving of their ideas, and like I remember being in this project recently where it was some of the most talented folks at Buck happened to all be on this one project, and they were drawing shit and making the most incredible things that they would just throw out because the next idea would come in that was better, right? And it's like you just see it grow, and it's so fun. It's such a fun thing to be a part of, and I think like we thrive on that, and everyone thrives on that at Buck, and I think that's how we push each other. It just happens. It's not like something that we're like stressing out about or worrying about. It's just it's why we're here, you know, it's why we're still here after 15 years, is because we still love that process, you know.
I mean, I kind of miss that, like working just by myself in a way, where that organic process where you just bouncing ideas around, and inevitably the better idea is just something completely random that no one's actually thought about. And, oh yeah, we'll try that. Oh, that's amazing. That's just,
and you all know it immediately. That's what's amazing.
Yeah,
you're like,
it just strikes a chord.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Yeah.
I think it's going back to that process, you know, the sharing, this, you know, sharing experience. I think that's
Sharing
the
is
hardest.
caring.
Yeah, I think that's what makes hard, you know, like thinking on the way to change, you know, with this coronavirus, you know, everyone working from home. I think we lose a little bit.
Don't share Corona. It's not a good idea.
We lose a little bit of that, you know, having each other in the same room, you know, bouncing ideas. It makes a little bit more hard. I think it is about all learning, you know, the new way to work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think it is just learning that and being open to that. I think part of that is like an optimism, right? It's like understanding that this is different, but that I think there's also a lot that we're learning from it right now that is going to be a big takeaway. You know, I think that who knows how long this is going to last, but we do know that the world's going to look different. And I think part of that, like, especially once we do start getting back to work, it's not going to be like, okay, doors are open, everyone come back in.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this is going to go on for a
It can't go
while.
back how it was, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think even so, I do think this was the way the industry was going in a lot of ways in terms of like a more distributed workforce before coronavirus. And I think it's caused us to fast track that in a lot of ways and sort of pressure test it. And I think, like, speaking for Buck as a larger studio, I think we do value that human interaction. So we've been less open to working with people from other places. And I think that's changing too. Like, I think we have more, we're gaining more skills for like working with like the most talented people from all over the world. So it's like, if you're someone who's never wanted to move to New York or never wanted to move to Los Angeles or Sydney, but you've always wanted to work with Buck, like, reach out, you know, like, we're definitely like very interested in connecting with people right now. And I think that way of working is changing and will continue to change over time.
I think like this time next year, there'll be a lot more digital nomads.
Yeah, I think it's changing.
Yeah.
To like what you're saying as well. For me, it's been like a year. I think I always trying to avoid to work with people remotely just because of the management, how, you know, you share information, how you give feedback, you know.
That's the real hard part. I think that needs
that's the real hard part. As I think creative, I think is make it even harder. You know, it's what we live in now. You know, you need to start, you need to jump in a Zoom call. You know, you need to It takes a lot more management and direction from us. But like 1 year ago, we start changing this mentality and we opened the studio in São Paulo. So it's a lot more sharing information between two studios, and made me think, oh, all right, you know, we need to find a way. We need to start working with the studio, using the tools we have nowadays to make, you know, to favor to us, you know. And it's funny now we're getting old. This pandemic and just came true, you know, after like a year, we're trying to work with more remote people, but in the same way, I think open a little bit more the mind to start experimenting working with people in the other places as well.
Yeah, same. And I think like you probably learned, like with your Sao Paulo studio, that like you develop over time, you develop a shorthand, right? And that it's still challenging, but like the bigger challenge is when you're working with new people who don't understand the process or don't have that shorthand or maybe aren't as used to doing that. Like we have a lot of, I would say even before this whole situation, we've had some teams, not just our other offices, but offsite teams that are really trusted, you know, like Andres
that
and
trust
Rasmus.
aspect is quite interesting as well. Because I think the trust aspect, because like, if you're hiring someone you've never worked with before, then there's a lot of trust that's up in the air.
Exactly.
It's really difficult if you're remote.
Yeah. And there's like your trust, but then also your own processes and like you know. But then I think there's also, you know, there are folks that we work with who just have been doing it for so long that they like have that shit on lockdown, you know, like they're like, they know how to build trust with you immediately. And that part of that is like showing up and communicating often and sharing their work all the time on a Slack channel. So you're not having to reach out and be like, hey, what, you know what I mean? And it's like,
I think
like,
that's
I think
the trick.
we'll all get better at that, you know?
I think that's the trick side. I think that's part of, you know, being a good freelance as well. People forget sometimes, you know, I always joke in the studio, you know, we're not really looking for rock stars, you know, we're quite looking for people that, you know, is up to work in the same environment. It's like your friend work with you and is happy, you know, to join the project and develop the project with you, then, you know, just be by himself and pushing. All right, he can do amazing work, but can't work on the environment you build up, you know, and just makes so hard, I think.
Yeah.
I still find the idea of a rockstar designer effing ridiculous.
Yeah.
I got one quick question, I guess, before we start wrapping things
up.
up.
Let's do the last one.
Like, which kind of companies, or, you know, which studios or individuals do you really like at the moment in terms of like their work? Like, who do you look for and go, oh, I wish we'd done that, or wish I'd have thought of that, or that's just, wow, that's amazing?
Jeez. I don't know. There's so many, man. I'm my own creative process is like maximum absorption. That's always been the way, even from the time I was a kid. I just literally look at everything and then I kind of let my brain filter it, and let it kind of filter through when I'm presented with like a problem that it makes sense for. So I don't know that I really have like anyone that stands out, or I would say there's so many that stand out.
Yeah, I guess nowadays with, you know, like Instagram and what have you, it's really difficult because you see so much amazing work from like day to day. I guess sometimes I don't know, it gets trickier and trickier to pick out in a way.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm bad with names, too. So.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, I recognize that project, I recognize the work or whatever.
Exactly.
You ask me who it is, I don't know, man.
Yeah. But I think it's go back to the same principle when we watch really good commercials. Sometimes you remember the commercial but you don't remember the product, you know. People use the commercial nowadays, advertisement, for a lot of the studios, you know. It's just a door for you sell yourself, you know.
Did you guys
forget about,
sorry to interrupt, but it just made me think, did you guys see that advert it's for a Japanese bike, and it was an advert and it popped up on YouTube before playing whatever video, and it's in this really amazing like anime style, and I think it was done by The Line. But man, check it out, just like search for The Line anime bike commercial. It only came out maybe like a couple of days ago, but it's stunning.
Bike? No, I didn't see that.
Bit of a segue there.
There's a studio. I do love The Line. They stopped by and visited us before all this madness in New York.
Those guys are awesome, man. The stuff they're pushing out, I'm like, it's just crazy. So good.
Yeah, it's I think it's like talking about, asking you what is you know, like studios standing out, you know. I feel the same with freelance, you know. In the past, I don't know, it used to be a lot easier to be the top of the game, you know, when you had like no internet like we have nowadays, not a lot of people promoting, and you see like 5-6 big studios, you know, in the time when we start, you know. Nowadays it's everywhere good work, you know. So I think part of that as well comes with marketing, you know. It's not just about doing a good job, you know. You're not
a freelancer anymore, you're also a marketing company.
You need to market yourself, you know. You need to market yourself.
I think that's true, but I think it's also like what you were talking about earlier, like that can get you through the door, but I think it's ultimately about then like, what do you do after that, and the relationships that you build after that. And sometimes, I'm not going to say always, but sometimes those can be like compete against each other, right? Like if you're really focused on marketing yourself and it's all about yourself, and that becomes kind of your main focus, and then you get in an environment that's like going to be about the group and the collaborative and the ultimately like the user that's experiencing that, or the audience that it's experiencing at the end, and you're just thinking about your own shit or market. Like that's why advertising is like dying right now. I mean, if I were to like be really reductive and break it down, it's that's kind of what the advertising model has been built on, is a lot of like these teams that go back to kind of the old 50s days of like art director, creative director teams.
Just want to get awards.
It's like they're like their own silo that is just jumping from company to company looking to win awards. They're not necessarily, I mean, the good ones I think win awards because they're solving their client problems or they're connecting with their audiences. But if they're just focused on their portfolio, like clients don't want that shit anymore.
Yeah,
you know, like how many times have you had agencies try to sell you like some 90-second spot that the client doesn't even want to buy? Like the client only has a budget for 30, but we'd really love the 90 because it's gonna be an awesome whatever for my portfolio. It's like I think those days are like they're gone, you know, like so. I don't know. I think like you do need to market yourself and you do need to get your work out there, but I also think like the real thing for us, the freelancers we work with over and over again, are the ones that are like super collaborative, no ego, have their shit on lockdown, like really responsible. Like those are the, you know, those are the ones that we have relationships with.
And you trust
as
well.
You know, a good number of the countries right now have it on lockdown. That's probably different.
Yes.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, yeah.
Cool. I think so we've been an hour and 10, so we're pushing a little bit. I think we should if we could probably go over the whole night.
Get back to the family. I think.
I just need to get another glass of wine, and we couldn't care. Yeah. But yeah,
alcohol does that.
Thanks so much, man. It was really a pleasure to talk to you as well, and thank you for all you share with everyone. You know, I think it's been really inspiring.
Yeah, very insightful.
Nice. Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Great talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too.